This is my niece that asked me to uh, to get on here. So this Zoom meeting. So I can't turn the young people down. I would say young people are really important. No matter how young you are, they're interested. A lot of people have helped me throughout my life. A lot of people from different tribes. A lot of people from different nationalities. I in teaching and doing a lot of other stuff. They've helped me out. So I also got to repay that back. I remember this one elder in Kiowa country. He come up to me and he said, "Hey, I have a couple stories for you." He said, "They'll help you in class." And he told me some of their origin stories and things that were important to the Kiowa people and stuff. And I've always later on in life realized that maybe I had a mark on my head or something, but people would always come up and tell me histories. And I was a history teacher myself. When I grew up, that's all I was talked about, because that my grandmother and them were the first generations on the reservation. Prior to that, the people that were there were the ones that were in conflict with the United States government through the 1800s. And so I had access to all the information. Even as a young boy, they'd make us sit down on the floor when people came to visit and get all that information. And they would talk about mold battles. They would talk about spirituality. They would some of the stuff used to when I was a little guy scare me out because I didn't understand what was going on. Now that I'm older, I realize ceremonies and the important things and Sundance and stuff, how that came to us and why it's being used. But at the time, as a young man, I was just totally kind of scared about what was happening. I was raised a Catholic. My father, a real strong Catholic, but he was also a man of ceremony and tradition. And I don't like using the word tradition because when you say tradition, that means it's stopped. There's no evolvement. Nothing evolves. And if you stop and think about it, since 1876 and 1840s and 1850s, we have evolved in a lot of different areas. No longer use bows and arrows or spears. We use the rifle. We use guns. We use a lot of different types of medicines. We're intermingled with other tribes now, and we use all their medicines also. So that's basically where I came from. I lived in Rosebud, born in Pine Ridge. Folks moved to Rosebud, and they worked for Indian Health Service. Education was really strong in our family. It was pushed. It was pushed hard, and and so we start to see some success in education. My brothers and I also had little athletic talents, and we some got to college to pay for some of our schooling for that. There was never a doubt that we were going to go to college. My father instilled that in us, and my mother did too. At the very beginning, when we started understanding things, but I had a big knack for history, and I was in fifth grade one time. My teacher called my folks, wanted to meet with us. Man, I thought I did something wrong. So we went up there after school, and he said, "Giving me a history test," and I got 100% on it. And she was amazed and wanted to talk to my folks about going to school. So that's about where I'm at now. I retired. I'm still plowing. I'm still traveling. Our sons has taken over coaching duties. We go and support him and our granddaughter and our granddaughters and grandsons endeavors in sports. We support them, but we just like to travel. We don't want to be stagnant. I feel like I'm going to miss something if I'm not out there. So that's kind of Julie and I's outlook on life. So, question.
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So let's just kind of start back with your education. So did you like school growing up since your family was so like education based?
I did. I did. I had a lot of good friends there. I'm not a math wizard. I used to have a couple of friends of mine that were math wizards, and we'd always get together. But back then, what's it, recess? Remember recess in grade school? Yeah, that's
Hmm.
one of the things we always look forward to. But yeah, education, I loved high school. I loved grade school. I loved middle school. We things and ideas I never thought of before. My folks bought a set of encyclopedias one time, and we used to sit downstairs in the house and read those things constantly, look up stuff and be asking questions and things. And I always thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, school. I like school.
Did you always want to pursue higher education?
I did. I didn't. How do I say this? I didn't want to work on the lower till. I didn't want to be way down there. I didn't want to be way up there either because the responsibility. I didn't. I wanted to have success in life so I could go out and do extracurricular activities, different things. I had a couple of heroes when I was in school. Growing up, I used to look up and I admired Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, uh, Crazy Horse, our leader. Remember, he's not a chief; he was our leader. And my dad. My dad could fix about anything. You know, he just sat down and figured things out. But and I knew those guys had some type of training, some type to do the things that he did. I mean, hell, look at Leonardo da Vinci. He invented the parachute, the bicycle, the helicopter, and we didn't have any idea of the materials that were available. He even perfected the landing pad, the landing system for our rockets that came back from the moon. It's cool, way back, you know. Now everybody says, well, he had alien technology. I don't know anything about that, but the guy's mind is something else. So yeah,
That's true. That's true.
yeah, I didn't want to scrape by.
No, it makes sense. So where did you go to school and what did you study?
I went to high school in Mission, South Dakota, Todd County High School. It was a public school, 90% Indian people, Indian students. The other 10% were ranch kids, local town kids. A lot of those kids, when they found out they were not Indian or they weren't enrolled, they were devastated because they grew up with Indian kids constantly. They knew a lot of different things. They knew how families were involved. But I graduated from there in 1970. Uh, I was awarded a wrestling scholarship at Augustana College in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So I went there. A couple of years. I was during all the Vietnam War, the hippie movement, the peace movement, meeting other peoples and stuff. And I didn't do well. My heart wasn't into it. I wrestled in college level. I lettered, but I just kind of wasn't into it. It's like I came home, started working at Pine Ridge for housing, didn't realize, man, this ain't going nowhere either, you know. That was what, 20, 21, 22, somewhere around there. No, wait, yeah, 20. Realized this wasn't going anywhere. And during all those travels and stuff, I ran into a couple of real good friends from Tama, Iowa. And we used to discuss stuff. They went to school at Santa Fe, IAI, and we were constantly talking to each other. But I was powwowing all this time too, traveling the country. And then I decided to go to vocational school. And so I was a licensed plumber in the state of South Dakota. I went to Mitchell. And then one time when I was in Rosebud working, I was laying under this house on Christmas Eve. It must have been about 20 below. It was maybe a foot of water under there. It was freezing. Me and a couple guys that were helping me. We weren't even supposed to work on that house, but there was a grandma in there with their grandkids. They were trying to have Thanksgiving, and man, it was ugly weather, and we got the job done. And she was real thankful. She was crying, trying to give us money, but we would take it. I realized I can't do this all my life, so I went back to college. I went to Black Hill State, and I ran into a really awesome man there. He was my track coach, Dave Little, and he encouraged me to become a teacher. I went to school to try to be an architect, but I wound up being a teacher on his suggestion, and it was the right thing to do. I mean, it led me down all kinds of different paths. Met my wife, opened doors on athletics, opened doors, a lot of different things. I had a chance to be a principal, but I decided not to. Principals, you're pushing papers and you're dealing with discipline. And I liked my classroom. I like explaining stuff and teaching things. So then here I am retired now.
Yeah, from what I've heard, you did really well as a teacher. I've heard a lot of people say good things about you being a teacher.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah. Uh, so while you were in school, like what kind of challenges did you face and what did you do to like get through these challenges?
In high school, it was just typical high school stuff. You got your high school bullies, you got your sports, you got. I had no problem going through that. I had a lot of friends, in high school. In college, it was totally different. I went to Augustana College, it's a Lutheran school in eastern South Dakota, and there were very few minorities. The minorities there were athletes. The black people that were there were football players, basketball players. I was a wrestler. There was like there were two or three of us there, Indians from Oglala, Mike Carlo, me, Mike Carlo, I, and Doug Bissett. We were the only Indians on campus. And so when you went to sociology classes, they're talking about poor people and struggles and stuff. Guess who got all the questions? Me. Coming, because I was the only Indian in there. So at an early age, I just set myself up to study that real hard because I didn't want to everybody judging the reservation off of me. Then it goes back to some other stuff that I grew up with. This. And Julie and I talk about this quite a few times. I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to play that victim card. The right, the people who had the right to play that victim card were the first generation on reservations. Their whole lifestyle changed overnight. So they were victims. You and I, your younger generation, and even the ones just ahead of me, my father and my mother, they had programs to help them, some kind of issues, relocation. Nowadays, you got all these social programs. If you don't have enough food to eat, you got social programs. Come on, right? If you don't have housing, there are housing on reservation. You don't have a lot of different medicine. We got IHS. Everybody knocks it, but it's still a medical issue. But we have no right to play victim, and I didn't want to be a victim. I wanted to challenge myself to go on and do other things and be on that next level. So, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Um, is there anything that you would change about your educational journey?
I would have finished the first time. I would have finished at
Yeah.
Augustana instead of waiting all those years later. I got out of Black Hills in 1982. I went to Augustana College in 1970, the fall of 1970. I graduated in Black Hills in 1982 in December. And so I should have just finished the first time. But there's so much stuff going on in the world. Vietnam was going on, that hippie movement, the early reservations were fighting for their rights now. There's the Indian Religious Act came through. All kinds of Sundance are starting to be revived, especially in Pine Ridge. You ought to seen the dancers that used to be at Full Scroll Sundance. We're talking upwards of 400 or 500 people in there, and they weren't all Ogallala. All the different tribes, all the different people came down, to participate in that. And there was a revival of a lot of our traditional things. So that was really important time. American Indian movement was going on with all the troubles that they brought. Some people knock them, but at the same time, they brought back that realization, that power to Indian people, start wearing their hair long, start participating in ceremonies. There was a violent aspect to that, but there's a violent aspect to a lot of things in the world now. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change
Yeah.
it. Probably go fishing some more, but I didn't.
Yeah. Well, you can do that now. A.
There you go.
What kind of advice would you give to our scholars about education and furthering their education?
Man, stick with it, no matter what, no matter how hard it is. I went back to school a second time. I had children. I had basically no money. I was living off of powwows, and you got to stick with. You got to challenge yourself, not to back off, because everybody, let me put it this way: what's our strongest aspect as Indian people? Is family, family support. That's our strongest. No matter what, your grandma, your dad, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins are going to support you. So when we get into a little issue, we get homesick. I'm gonna go back to home. Grandma's gonna, and then never go back to school, and you become a burden to society. Not outside society, but the reservation society. I would say stick with it and get through because man, it's going to enhance your life. You're going to do a lot of great things for other people. You're going to have retirement. In my case, retirement. We as Indian people tend to think about just tomorrow. We don't tend to think about 10 years down the road or even 20 years. The last great person I seen do that was Lionel Bordo, late Lionel Bordo. Since taking let's go down the road 20 years when they first started that. He already knew what was going on. So we got to find that kind of stuff and stick with it. I always talk to kids and I'm not I'm not the answer for everything, but I always tell them, don't be a burden on your family. As young men and warriors, we're not supposed to be burdened. We're supposed to be protectors. Don't be a burden on your family. Don't be a burden on your tribe. Don't be a burden on your society. In the society, be somebody that goes out there and change. We got enough victims already. We got enough people that can't think ahead. We got enough of that already. But think down the road. Get your schooling done. Because someplace down the road, you're gonna help your people. You're gonna help your family, your tribe. That's what I tell young people. Oh yeah, plan out retirement too.
Is there anything that everyone should have on their retirement bucket list that you would recommend?
No, just plan one. Because look, the next 4 years are gonna be tough on the national society, maybe even the world society. Next 4 years are gonna be rugged. And you gotta have something planned out. Deep inside me, that 16-year-old boy is still there. On the outside is a guy that has bad knees and hurts and runs and stuff. But that 16-year-old boy never thought anything about retirement because everybody around him was working constantly. Someplace down the line, you're gonna have to slow down. You're gonna have to retire. You don't want to live off your family. You don't want to live off your children. You don't want to live off your grandchildren. That's tough. When I was growing up, a lot of that happened. A lot of people were living with their children and grandchildren and caused extra burden on our family. Sure, they say historical societies, we take care of each other. But even back in the time, historical societies, those grandmas and grandpas, they were a functioning uh, part of society. 1950s, 1960 Pine Ridge, grandma and grandpa didn't do much, and everybody had to take care of them. Even now, too
No,
much.
that makes a lot of sense. No, whatever you want to say, we'll listen to it. Hey. I'll take a couple minutes just to see if anyone who's watching has any questions for you, or if they want to ask anything, they can put it in the chat or they can come off the mic and ask. I'll just open up the floor for a little bit.
Okay.
Lynette asks, was it hard to switch careers when you did?
Not really. I read a lot. I've always read a lot. And so when I switched from construction over to schooling, to teaching and stuff, there was more reading going on. I was assigning a lot more reading in my classes to everybody to read. And, I taught on Indian reservations, both in Rosebud. I taught in high school. When I graduated, I went over and taught. And then now I'm at the Wind River Reservation. I taught at Wyoming Indian High School. And one thing I noticed that in both areas, and probably true for every place else, is today's educational society is so overwhelming. You got to have this, and you have the pedagogies and all this stuff. Our kids want to know what histories in their time periods back in the 1800s. They want to know how their family names came about. They want to know about these ceremonies. And some ceremonies you can talk about, and some you can't. They want to know a lot of different things. And so when they get a little break, they would ask me questions about Little Bighorn or Wounded Knee or ceremonies and stuff. And I would share with them what I could. With the idea that they would go on and do some more research. And some of those, like when I was in our coaching, we used some of those stories in our coaching when our kids were running, teaching them how to get to that one aspect of sports where you just think your whole body's going to shut down, how to power through it. We used a lot of those stories too. but it wasn't that difficult. I mean, would you rather be laying in a foot of water under a house at 23 below zero on Christmas Eve, or be in a nice warm classroom? I remember. I think back and I hope that grandma's house is okay. Of course, she's probably gone now, but at the time, hope everything was working out all right. I just thought I could do better going back to school and helping people than laying under their house trying to fix some plumbing. So
No, you have a lot of like really good knowledge just of all sorts of things. Another question we have is from Ariana. I think I'm saying that right. Would you ever consider going back again for something else? I'm assuming that means, would you ever consider going back to school?
I I probably would. I would. But if I went back to school again and I had my choice of schools, I would go back just to learn the straight up, straight fact history. I don't want to know any of those pedagogies and how to do this, how to do that. I just want the straight truth, the historical truth. It used to be taught in universities back in the 40s and 50s. I don't want to know all these methods of, of teaching it or methods of absorbing it. Or right, I don't want. I don't want to. I just want the straight knowledge. And right now, the straight knowledge dealing with Indian histories is coming from oral histories. Teachers in college, academia people, they have to have 3 or 4 people verify that story. It has to be written. If it's written, then they think it's valid. Well, anybody can write anything down, make up their own stuff. But oral histories for Indian peoples, oral histories is the truth. Because that's how we learned and that's how we kept our histories. But then, if I went back, that's all I'd want, is straight honest truth. I don't want to know any learning methods or stuff. But you can't find that no more because everybody's tied up. Ways of presenting, ways of absorbing.
That's very true. So that kind of takes us into the second half of our little chat here is about work life and career. So just to get a base understanding of where you started, what was your first job?
I was a grocery boy for $1 an hour. I sacked groceries.
Really?
Yeah, I sacked groceries in Rosebud, and what was that? 19. I was 16. I'd be 1968, 67, and there were some great people in there that were older, that were language speakers, first generation language speakers, and they would tell me things. And my dad's my dad was my dad was fluent Lakota speaker. My mom was somewhat, she knew what was going on and everything we talked about. My grandmothers were fluent, came from that old generation. And that's reminds me that even now, at my age, we're taking Lakota language classes from Makria Luta School, Rekla, because man, I want to know. All these years, I've been so busy with life and doing other things, I never had to sit down and had the chance to do it. So now I'm doing it now. So this reminds me, what was the question again? I got off track.
It was just what was your first job? That was it.
That was my first job, and what was cool about it in Rosebud, now you can picture this in your mind's eye. Paul Hamas was the store. That was the store's name. And it was a big open area. And in the early in the mornings, there's a big table out in front. And he put this big giant cup of coffee. I mean, a big old what am I pitcher of coffee out on his table, and he put the loose tobacco and cigarette papers out there. And all the old fellows would come up there and they drink coffee in the morning, roll cigarettes, and they would talk. That's the same store I worked in. So every now and then I'd hear them. They were talking about stories. They talk about things a long time ago, or they would just joke around. Those old people would come in from out in the countries and team and wagon. Even in 1968, they were still having team and wagon, and they would come in and they would visit once a month. They'd come in. I was only like maybe 120 pounds, but we had a load of 100-pound bags of potatoes on the back of those wagons, and it was pretty cool because these guys would joke around in Lakota. Sometimes I could figure out what they were saying. The other times they knew I was struggling and they would come help me put the potatoes in it. But I really liked that job because all kinds of different things were going on. Social learning, is that what it is? Yeah, social learning. But it was from old people. That generation, I said that the only ones that have the right to play the victims. Yeah, that was my first job.
Oh, it's really cool. Yeah, I bet that
Dollar
was
an
really
hour.
cool to $1 an hour.
A dollar
That's
an
crazy.
hour.
Can't imagine that now. Do you have a favorite job that you have done?
Teaching, teaching and coaching. Uh, we get called back for substitutes all the time. I never have any problem in the classroom. And even when I was teaching, I didn't have a problem with discipline. Coaching, love to see people go beyond what they think is their limitations and be very, very successful and bring that glory and honor back to the communities. So those two, of course, I'm a powwow guy too, and that's not really work. That's fun. And but yeah, teaching, do it all over again. I didn't want to be a principal. As I figured if I was a principal, I'd be looking for a job every 2 years because I'd kick half the kids out of school, fire about some of the teachers that were lazy. I'd be in trouble so much that I'd have to move on to a different school.
Well, it's a good thing you were a teacher and a coach then. Have you noticed any major differences in the workforce from when you started to now?
Yes, let's see, major. They don't want to think for themselves. They use their phones. They don't too much checking with their social networking instead of making a choice. Um, you could walk down the streets in Pine Ridge and see half these people, more than half the people who are struggling on your phone on a phone. Walk through a high school classroom, no phones are allowed, but they still sneak them in and they still do stuff. And so they're not. There's no or originality of thought. I don't. They don't write cursive. They don't know how to write cursive. They don't know how to spell because you got it all on your phone. And that's a major issue I see in education. Plus, now you got too many people trying to say, "Well, we can do better if we do this," but nobody follows through on the direction. Nobody don't fact checks if it's working all right. And so, yeah, it's one of our biggest issues now with the new president coming in. And there's rumors out there of him uh, abolishing the Department of Ed. On reservations, the Department of Ed is really important because all of our reservation schools, our public schools, even our church schools, depend on a Department of Ed for a lot of stuff, monies, finance, foods, and things. So yeah, I'll stop there because I'll go on forever about what I think is wrong.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Um, so now you said that you had changed your career path at one point. Did you have any challenges while you were finding your career, or did it just kind of come to you, like you said?
Well, when I switched over from like doing construction work and plumbing, I had the good fortune, the really good fortune of running into uh, track coach, a gentleman by the name of Dave Little at Black Hill State. You know him as really helping with the powwows in the early days when they first started, all kinds of different things. I didn't want to be 50 years old. At the time I went back, I think I was 28 or something. I didn't want to be 50 years old and think, man, I should have went out for track in college the second time. I didn't want to do that. Be that. So I walked into his office. I was really overweight and talked with him. And he just started hanging around and telling me things. He has helped a lot of Indian students get through Black Hills. He's seen a lot of great athletes who didn't finish college, and he kind of took that personal. He took it personal, a lot of different things. And him and my mom and my dad, they would constantly talk to me about schooling and stuff. And he kind of set me in the direction of being a teacher. I had no plans to be a teacher. I remember when I was in high school, man, some of those teachers were rugged. And of course, I was a little butthead too. So all kinds of different things. But yeah, and then a lot of the people in the powwow world would come by and tell me, like I said earlier, tell me stories that might help. And it was just back in the early 70s, late 60s, almost up to the early 80s. A lot of people, those old people, like to tell histories. They would like to tell stories that, powwows, you go around breakfasts, you share breakfasts, everybody a coffee. And they still do that now, but not to the extent like they used to. And so, now, next one.
Um, you kind of touched on like how you overcame these challenges, but was there anything else that you did when times were getting tough? during, your job or during your educational period that you did to like help yourself get through that, whether that be like through culture or whether that be like through religion or anything?
I think just talking with a lot of different people in religion. Like I said, we went to Catholic church quite often, and then other things start coming around. But pray every night, still do. Folks, I was pushed on me by my folks, and still do that. I had a bad bout with alcohol, being young and single and powwowing and stuff. Never drink at powwows. Never. Nobody's gonna vote for a dancer that's drunk. But other times things would come up and would be drinking. Had a hard fight with that. Walked away from that. Uh, Never got into drugs. The reason for that is people will hire somebody who drinks alcohol, but people ain't gonna hire no druggie. And so we, even in college when we were on an athletic team, somebody would walk in smelling like weed or going to smoke weed. A lot of us would just get up and walk out because it just wasn't my bag. And, but the prayer and just being a bullheaded. I'm not going to let these guys beat me. And I'll tell you a story. When I was a junior in high school, we were going to Aberdeen, South Dakota. I was in boys club, a boys state, where everybody studies government, and you were appointed by your school. I was sitting on a bus with a bunch of kids from the south end of South Dakota heading to Aberdeen, and there's some guys behind me that were discussing uh, uh, the stock market, and they were using words I never heard before, and I felt about that small. I felt like an idiot. So I've also made it a point if I heard a word I didn't know, I would look it up. I would check it out. I didn't want to be that person that didn't understand something. And that's probably why I'm going back to trying to learn our Lakota language better than I know it now. Is there are words in there I want to know. Some of those songs we dance to are wicked. You know that they're wicked, and I want to know what those words are saying. Some of those songs are gonna make you cry when you dance. You know that make you want to cry and stuff, man. And it's just so emotional. I want to know. Yes, I'm just a nosy guy, I guess, but stuff like that. I still do to this day. I read a lot. Words I don't understand, I'll go check them out. I'm not unique. I'm not unique. It's my whole generation that did that. We read a lot. There was no Facebook. There was no movies. There was a bookmobile. I used to come to the elementary school. There'd be a big line of us up there all the time. Now a bookmobile shows up and might get shot. Huh?
No, for real. Would you have any advice for any students who are going to be a teacher or pursuing that degree?
I would say look to how you got to where you're at. What teachers influenced you? How do I want to be a teacher? What do I really want to? Am I in this for the money, or am I in this for helping the community or helping the students? I see some great things coming out of some of our young teachers. A lot of them are trying to help with the language. You can intermix all that stuff. I see a lot of great things, great ideas. Don't get stale and stagnant though, and be there for your community and your students. Don't just be there for the paycheck. Teaching is a very, very rewarding job, but not in terms of finances, especially college. College teachers make less than high school teachers do. It's just a tough situation, but be there for your students and be there because once you get there for your students, you're going to get to know their families, and their families are going to talk good about you. They're going to talk bad, and most times, if you're helping the students, they're going to back you. They're going to back you. But yeah, be there for your student, not for your paycheck, and
Would you
understand
say
what
the,
community you're at. Pardon?
I was just going to ask, would that same advice go for coaching as well?
Oh, exactly. One thing about coaching, especially athletes or students, someplace in there, like that show. Do you remember that one old show, The Little Giants?
Mm-mm.
Everybody in there is going to have a time. It's one of those times, one of those places, someplace somebody's going to have a very exceptionally outstanding performance. And that's what you're teaching for, you're coaching for. My instance, we used a lot of old warrior stories, old kill stories that they used in the 1870s and 1860s. We talked about Custer, we talked about Fetterman, we talked about how 14 and 15-year-olds were the ones that did all the fighting at Little Bighorn. It wasn't those older warriors. 13, 14, 15-year-olds, they had no idea what war was like. The older guys did, so they would kind of stay back a little bit. But those young boys, they went out and charged and they did everything. So we used all that stuff and how to train, why we're doing this. A lot of coaches go out to do things, but they never explain the method of why we're doing this and the results of that. And that's all we did here. Wyoming Indian has a really high tradition of being state basketball champions. What you don't realize is they've got 22 state titles there too, and a number of their kids have gone on to running colleges and also All Americans, college All Americans.
Mm-hmm. Um, no, it's really interesting. Uh, what are some challenges that, up and coming teachers might face that they might not think about or they might not be aware about that you, with all
Cultural
of your experience?
cultural differences.
Hmm.
Cultural differences. Young teachers get into a community. What is that culture in that community? That school is there for the community. That school doesn't exist because for you.
Hmm.
Find out what that cultural community is like. We're having some little issues here coming up because some of our teachers come from off the res. They're trying to change the calendar to suit them, not what's on the res. This is just an instance to find out what the community. We have a, a couple of teachers here, and especially one is a good friend of ours. And she'll walk into any store on the reservation, and she'll get mobbed by little kids. She'll get mobbed by even high school kids. That's because she learned the culture, and she taught with that. And her husband's the same way. He was just voted the Wyoming uh, champion of education, only given out by the school board of the state of Wyoming. And that's what they did. They found out what was important in the community and they followed that. So if you're a young teacher, find out what your community's like. Maybe you don't like that community. Maybe you want to change some things. But remember, it's community, that community you're in. For young teachers, it's the first couple of years, you can struggle. It's just it. You're gonna struggle. And you just like things in life, you're gonna struggle. Taylor Swift struggled. I'm not a Swiftie, but she struggled too for a while. You know? So you're gonna struggle, just because you have an education, you got that piece of paper doesn't mean you know everything. Learn from your community.
Very true. Education never ends. So for a lot of our students that we have, a lot of them are either going to school for the first time, but they're a little bit older, or they're going back to school, but they have, kids and a family now. Can you kind of talk about what that was like for you, going back to school and you had your kids and all of that?
Finding babysitters, studying till 3 in the morning, eating beans 5 times a week, all that struggles and stuff. It's worth it because you're also giving your kids an idea that hey, school's important. That's why mom and dad's here. This must be important because I'm up here. Also, it opens your children's eyes up to seeing something other than a reservation school. You know, the examples of different. People do Christmas differently. All examples that you learn in school, grade school, art projects and such. But it gives those younger people, if you're your children, a different view of education than you would see at home in Pine Ridge or Rosebud, Eagle Butte, or wherever you're at, Navajo Nation, or Hardin or Lodge Grass, Montana. Just get a different view of it. But stick with it because the end it pays out a million times more than not doing it. It's hard. Nothing's easy in life. You know that.
Hmm. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for these students who are going back to school and they have kids and, multiple jobs or whatever it is. Like, it was hard enough for me, and I was just going to school at the time. So I can't imagine what it's like having like all these extra things that you have to be on top of. So a lot of
Well,
respect for all of you guys.
I was envious of you guys at Black Hills because you guys, the student union was awesome. These
Yeah.
arts, when I was there, when I was there in the '80s, the student union looked like a old used up bowling alley.
Well, I was upset because they finally finished the new library pretty soon after you left, or after I left. So I didn't get to
Wow,
use it.
they built that new gym and a whole complex after we were gone too. Then they had the audacity to ask us for money. I was already in debt, student loans and stuff. That's another thing too. Student loans, there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money out there. You just research, find ways of going back to school. And there's also nothing wrong with taking a student loan. The idea of the education being more important than student loans.
We have another question from Daphnia. Probably saying that wrong, excuse me. But did you ever teach off the reservations?
No, I wanted to. Never did. I wanted to teach inner city Denver. I
Did you
just wanted
really?
that. No, I didn't, but I wanted to. I wanted
Oh,
that challenge. I wanted that challenge just to see what it was like. Probably would have turned into a drunk, but with all the problems, but I wanted that opportunity to try it. I always thought about it. I was other things got in the way, other things I went a different path with.
so does any of our viewers have any other questions for Chico on career or being a teacher, being a coach, or anything like that? I'm gonna take that as a no. A. But yeah, no, this is a lot of great information that you're sharing with us, and it's really interesting to get to know this about you too, just because I do know Chico on a personal level. He's been in my life my entire life, so it's really cool to hear about all this stuff. Is there any last minute things you'd want to say, give encouragement or something to think about, or even if you have some stories that you want to share? That was another thing that our scholars were wanting, was just to hear stories from the elders.
I don't know about stories, but I would tell you what, finish school. It's going to be difficult. Rely on other people too. There's nothing wrong with talking with other people. There's nothing wrong with going home and seeing grandma. Nothing wrong with talking to your dad or your uncles or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. But the idea is you got to get back to school. Your people, no matter what tribe you are dependent on you. Your family's dependent on you. Your children who you went back to school with, they're dependent on you in the future. Junior high and high school kids, they're, you may be in college with elementary, but by the time they're in junior high and they're in high school, they're dependent on you big time. And so finish that. There's always people in your corner. Some of them are quiet. Some of them will say something real every now and then to help you along. There's also somebody who's going to be negative. You go back to reservations and you see run into negativity everywhere. But on a college level, we need you. And if you don't want to go to college, you want to go on to trade school, do it. We got to have something in the modern world. We don't know what's going to happen in 30 years. Don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. The United States may be gone. Our treaty rights might be overlooked with this new president. They might be drilling like crazy everywhere. Um, all kinds of different things going on. It's important that you have education so we have a way to fight. I had this friend of mine, he was a World War II tail gunner and a bomber over Germany. His name was Chris Goggles. He's passed on now, but he always come up to me. He would always come up to me and tell me when I was teaching. Back in the days, he said we used to do battle. We battled other tribes, and we battle. Uh, we battle everybody. He said today, education is the new battle. We got to get through it. We got to win it. Otherwise, we're not going to be here. Where's our languages being taught at? They're being taught at schools now. They're being taught at schools. They're being taught everywhere but in the house because those fluent first language speakers are rapidly disappearing. I don't care what tribe you are. Uh, schools are reviving that, bringing it back. Look at Red Cloud, for instance. It used to be what everybody said one of the worst places because you got punished for talking your language. Right now, they're at the forefront of bringing that language back. Your brother's wedding, our son's wedding, I went back there. See, all these little guys were talking about Dakota. Everybody was there. I was kind of looking around like, hey, what's that? Did I take a step back in history or what? It was good. It was good. You know, so stick with it. You know, stories. We got tons of stories, oral histories. Remember them when they tell you. Go to your old people and ask them, hey, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt, can you tell me something from the days of the past? We used to go to powwows in the early 70s, late 60s, and my grandmother would sit next to us and she would tell us things, tell us about Crazy Horse. She would tell us about how the reservations first got set up. Remember, my grandmother's a Puyer. There's Puyers everywhere now. But she would tell us some of these old war stories. And then and there's stories in there that talk about women being at the forefront of changing a lot of different things. I gotta find those stories for our women. You gotta find those stories. I had a cross country team one time of young boys, young guys, freshmen and sophomores. They were mixed. There were some Oglalas, there were some Rapos, there were some Shoshones. Had a Pawnee in there. You know, this Eskimo, Inuit people, and we tell stories before we read. And we was on the state start line, and I had all these guys bunched up, and I was telling them a story. I said, I have this story. It was told to me. So I'm gonna tell you guys this. During the Little Bighorn, I said the fight was so strong that his old words stayed back, and those 13, 14, 15-year-old boys would be the ones out there pushing. When George Custer was riding that line, I said, Crazy Horse and his crew rode up to this on the one side of the battle, and there's this young boy. They figured he's about 14. He was riding a charge. Back in the days, they used to charge the enemy and ride sideways, and to show their bravery. And he rode that. He charged that. He rode that line. And that was up on that tall ridge. He rode that line, and people were shooting. And soldiers were shooting at him. They couldn't hit him. And he rode up to Crazy Horse. And Crazy Horse rode up, and he challenged him to follow him. Well, Crazy Horse, knowing how deadly this was, he kind of set back a little bit. So that boy took off again, rode that line again. Another time, they were shooting at him. Didn't hit him. Rode up to Crazy Horse again, and Crazy Horse just stood there and watched. That boy charged. The fourth time, he rode up to Crazy Horse, looked him in the eye, and he shook his belt. And when he shook his belt, those bullets fell out. The ones that were spent shells. And people today say that can't happen. But you got to remember, as Indian people, we have power. We were sacred. That boy was sacred that day. He shook his belt, and all these bullets fell out. And so Crazy Horse had no choice. He had to ride with him. So they charged that line, and they rode down, and they were shooting at him, and then they split that line. They rode right through that line. Everybody followed him. 5 minutes later, that whole battle was over. Little Bighorn was done. They figured 20, 25 minutes. That's the longest it took. They split that line, and they rode over, and I said, that was young boys, ages 13, 14, and 15. All we have to do today is run a 3.1-mile race. You're 13, you're 14, you're 15 years old. All we got to do is run a 3-mile race. We can't be tired. Our ancestors did all this. And I looked up, and that one Pawnee boy, he was shaking. He was crying. Let's go now, let's go now. I said, hey, we got to wait for the gun to start. My guys were all pumped up and ready to go. Let's go. I said, when you get to that part in your race where you think you can't do this anymore, you remember that young boy that challenged Crazy Horse. Come through that. But it had all these other teams that were around us. They were listening to us too. They'd come over and they'd listen to our stories. When that gun went off, our guys were gone. Halfway through that race, when everybody started training, our guys start charging. We won that. We almost had a perfect score. We didn't quite have it. But that Pawnee boy, he was yelling and hollering in the back, getting everybody going. Our guys were talking to each other when they were racing. That's when I realized I kind of gotta watch what I say to some of these guys. Quite a few years later, we were talking at a track meet, and they said, Chico, tell about that story about Little Bighorns. So I was telling, there were some young guys there, and I was talking to it, and there were some older guys there that read for me, and they were talking and everything, and finally that one boy, young boy, he said, hey, who won that race? And who won that battle? Those other boys, I can't remember that, those other two boys. We did. He said, we won it 4 times. We won that race 4 times. That so they were all into it. But yeah, things like that. We want to look at black marks on a white piece of paper, using writing ideas, theories. You can't be afraid of that. A lot of times we're afraid to read. We're afraid to see negative things. You can make positive things out of negative things. You can change things. All Indians are drunks. No, we're not. We're not. At one time we may have been, but not anymore. We do all kinds of different things. All Indians live off government money. Oh, we're not. A lot of that money is owed to us. Some of that money is taxes. All Indians don't pay taxes. We pay taxes. So you gotta combat that. You don't have to get feisty or really outlandish and stuff, but just know those facts in your head. You know those facts in your head, you can start changing things. Over here we have a place that has a tax valuation. A lot of the border schools here get more money out of our taxes than the tribal schools. And the tribal schools, the tribe reservation here has got oil on it. All that oil taxation money goes off the rest. Very little comes into the rest. And so a lot of those districts, you can tell them, if we ever shut this or change this tax valuation rate, your school was shut down because you don't have any money. All the money we get, we use as best as we could, but we could have more money. So things like we got to know that kind of stuff to change things. And change comes. Change comes. No longer have to send our kids to Carlisle. No longer have to send your kids to Flandreau out of Muss. We have social programs. So I was like, back in the days, they had to send them off because there was no jobs. There was no food at home. My father, he went to Holy Rosary because there was just nothing at home, and they stayed there all year round. And so the Jesuits fed them, clothed them, put them in housing and stuff, took care of them. Maybe not the best in the world, but it was better than being at home. But they didn't have anything, and so a lot of people want to knock that. But at the same time, with those children that went to Holy Rosary Mission, St. Francis, or wherever, when they joined the military, they're already used to dormitory life. They were already used to methods how they ate. Pandemic came around. Everybody's vaccination. The IHS dealing with Indian people already knew how to get the vaccination out at 100% better than every place else in the world. So there's value in that. There's a lot of great things that came out of that, but we also want to see the negative things. Make positive out of negative. Easy to do.
No, that's really good. We actually had someone, Gayla, say, "This is really good and motivating and realistic." And then Ariana said, "I admire your education. Coming from addiction and recovery, my education has been my biggest priority, and I strive to be a change for my community. I appreciate your messages and advice. You are truly an inspiration. You are truly an inspiration, sure, sir. Thank you." And then we have one more question from Christine. And then we can wrap up after this. But what would you say to tribal men or tribal youth based on your dad or your grandparents, what they taught you? What would you say to them?
I would say go back. My father and my uncles and them, that idea of how to deal with women, idea of how to deal with family, totally different than it is today. I mean, your dad's family's first with your dad. Family's first with us. And that family was first with my father and my uncles and stuff. Everything they did was for the family. Nowadays, we see things a lot different. Everybody's wanting this, everyone wanting that. But family first, culture-wise, the men are the last ones to eat. If you stop and think about it, nowadays, men's the first one to eat. But culture-wise, men are the last ones to eat. They're the protectors. So be that protector. I I always tell I don't always tell, but I tell people, back in the days when I grew up, young ladies were proud of their uncles. Young ladies didn't mind being around their uncles. Today's society, young ladies are scared of their uncles. Young ladies are scared of their cousins. There's a lot of different things out there that's totally changed. If you ever get a chance to read Ella Deloria, the Dakota Tales, she tells stories in there about how things used to be in the back a long time ago. She tells an instance where she was riding in a wagon going across to visit somebody. Remember, they were Episcopalian church members, and she ran into this guy on horseback, and he told her he had no business being on here. She said, "Well, I'm trying to get to so and so's because they're sick. You still have no business being there. Bad things happen on here." He said, "I'll escort you to this woman's house where she was going." When they got there, he's, "Don't you come out here no more by yourself because things have changed." He said, "I'm one of those that people don't want to be around because I do bad things." But he called me. I think she said she called him. She called him uncle. Didn't know who he was. She called him uncle, so he had to follow that uncleness, that what uncle stand for. So he had to protect her, but he told her not to come back anymore. And so there's all kinds of different stories and I deal with relationships how they used to be. We need to go back to that. We need to go back to that. First time I got called Lake She, I was kind of upset because I thought I was a young guy. And I'm thinking, oh man, this guy's gonna ask for money. But he did it out of respect. So I was, gee, I'm not that old. But I guess I was. To him, I was. And so got to follow those relationships. And your brother will stand up for you no matter what. Yeah, he'll be there no matter what. So that's
Mhm.
those old relationships that we got to get going again. It's just the society got so fast, technology took over so fast. It's just Facebook is good in some aspects, terrible in other aspects.
Well, I think this is all I had for you, but you gave us a lot to think about. You gave us a lot of good, tips and stories, and quite a few of the students have already done the event evaluation form, and they're all very appreciative of your time and you just sharing your story. So thank you so much for that, Chico.
Does that mean I get a bonus?
Hey,
Hell yeah, laugh. Tell everybody you gotta laugh. Everybody's gotta have a sense of humor. Gotta laugh all the time. You don't laugh, the world's boring. I like to laugh. You know that. Your dad and we always joke around all the time. Just gotta learn how to laugh. That Indian humor, I guess.
I like to think we're the
Oh,
funniest
thank you
people on
for
the planet,
listening.
but that's just me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today. And thank you to our students for coming and joining with us. Uh, yeah, that's all I have for you guys. So thank you very much.